They noticed your mind before they ever learned your name. They felt the weight in your silence, the kind that makes loud people uneasy, the kind that makes weak arguments fall apart on their own. You never needed a stage. Your presence was already saying enough. You walk into a room, and the performance in it gets a little harder to keep up. Not because you're trying to expose anyone, you're just not playing along. And people can feel the difference between someone performing confidence and someone who simply isn't afraid. Your intelligence isn't loud, but it's precise. It notices what people don't say. It catches the gap between a person's words and their tone. That's not a trick. That's attention, sustained, patient attention, built over years of watching instead of talking. Maybe that's made you feel like an outsider in rooms where everyone else looked comfortable. But here's a better way to say it. You were never hard to understand. Some people just weren't paying close enough attention to keep up. And that's not a flaw in you. You've had hard seasons, closed doors, long silences, people who didn't stay. None of that was a punishment, and it didn't need a cosmic reason to matter. It was just difficult, and you got through it anyway. You came out steadier, clearer, less impressed by noise. And while some people were busy performing, you were quietly building something real. Patience, discernment, the ability to read a room without needing to control it. You never needed to prove that. Growth was the proof. Peace was the proof. And your silence was never weakness. It was restraint, which is a different thing entirely. It's your turn now, not to dominate anything, just to stop shrinking. Before we go further, thank you for being here and for being someone who values substance over performance. If this is landing, tap like and subscribe. It helps this kind of message reach more people who need to hear it, instead of getting buried by louder, emptier content. Now let's get into it. 1. You don't need to prove anything to be taken seriously. They called you quiet, and they meant it as a small thing. What they actually meant was, you couldn't be easily managed. Quiet isn't the same as passive. You were never short on things to say. You were just careful about when saying them actually mattered. Some people need volume because they don't have much else holding them up. Their confidence is a performance built for an audience. Yours doesn't need one. It was built slowly in ordinary rooms without anyone clapping, through nights where the only person keeping you going was you. That's the real difference. Their confidence needs a crowd. Yours doesn't need anything outside of you to stay intact. You walk into a room without needing to impress it. You speak only when it's worth speaking. And when you do, it tends to land, not because you're trying to be dramatic, but because you don't waste words on things that don't matter. People sometimes test you, not because they're trying to learn from you, but because they're looking for a crack, a moment where you fold the way they might. You usually don't, not out of stubbornness, just because you've already thought it through before they brought it up. That's not about being smarter than anyone. It's about not needing to explain yourself to people who have already decided not to listen. You let your actions speak, and you let your calm carry more weight than someone else's noise. Real steadiness doesn't need an audience to confirm it's real. You're not confused the way performative people often are, because you're not trying to convince a crowd of anything. You already know what you think, and you're comfortable sitting with it quietly until it's useful to say out loud. People don't always give credit out loud when you turn out to be right. That's fine. You're not collecting credit. You're building something that doesn't depend on being acknowledged to be worth doing. You're not in competition with noise. You're building something slower and more durable. While some people chase reactions, you're chasing clarity. While some people spiral under pressure, you tend to get steadier. That's not an accident. It's a habit you built on purpose, one hard season at a time. You weren't born knowing how to do this. You built it. And that's exactly why it's yours. 2, you notice more than people expect. You don't just hear what someone says. You notice how they say it. The pause before the answer. The tone that doesn't quite match the words. That's not mind reading. That's just paying real attention, which most people stop doing the moment they start waiting for their turn to talk. Picture a table full of people, everyone laughing, everyone performing a little. You're not distant, you're just present in a different way. You notice who's genuinely relaxed and who's managing an image. That's not judgment. It's just awareness, and awareness doesn't have to come with hostility toward the people you notice things about. You've picked this skill up the hard way through experience, not a class. People sometimes ask where you learned to read a room like that, as if it needs a certificate. It doesn't. It needs time, attention, and a willingness to actually watch instead of assuming. You've caught the small things. A joke that was really a jab, a compliment that was really competition, a boss who over-explained something because they felt a little threatened. You notice, and you usually don't make a thing of it because you don't need to prove that you noticed. Just knowing is often enough. That's not about being suspicious of everyone. Most people aren't against you. They're just human, distracted, sometimes insecure, sometimes careless with their words. Reading people well doesn't mean assuming the worst about them. It means understanding them a little better than they expect, which usually makes you more patient with people, not less. In a meeting full of people trying to sound smart, you might stay quiet, not because you have nothing to add, but because you're figuring out what's actually true before you say something out loud. Then one real question can shift the whole room, because it wasn't performance. It was thought. Nobody needs a resume to justify insight. You've learned plenty from paying attention to real life, pattern, consequence, people, things no course fully teaches. That's not a replacement for study. It's a different kind of education, and both matter. Being observant isn't the same as being cold. If people call you intense, it might just mean you notice more than they're used to being noticed by. That's not a flaw to fix. It's just a different setting than most people are calibrated to. You don't need to expose anyone or prove a point. You just don't get fooled easily anymore. And there's a quiet peace in that, not superiority, just peace. 3. What you lived through taught you things a classroom couldn't. You didn't read about hard things, you got through them. That's a different kind of understanding, and it tends to run deeper because it was tested in real conditions, not theoretical ones. Some people collect degrees and titles, and those things matter. They're not the enemy here. But knowledge on paper and knowledge earned through actually living something are two different tools, and you happen to be well equipped with the second one. You learned in quiet, unglamorous moments, figuring things out because you had to, not because someone assigned it. That kind of learning sticks differently. It's why you can walk into a stressful situation and start making sense of it instead of freezing, because you've been in enough chaos before to recognize its shape. People sometimes wonder how you stay calm when things fall apart. It's usually because you've already been through a version of this before, and you know it passes. That's not magic. That's memory put to good use. There's a kind of steadiness that only comes from rebuilding yourself after something broke. You don't need a title to have that kind of grounded presence. You just need to have actually gone through it and come out functional on the other side. When people are unsure what to do, they sometimes come to you, not because you declared yourself an authority, but because your answers tend to feel earned rather than recited. That's not about ego. It's about the fact that people can usually tell the difference between advice that came from a book and advice that came from having lived it. You don't need to broadcast your story to be taken seriously. When you do speak, it tends to carry weight because people sense it's coming from somewhere real. That's worth more than volume. None of this makes you better than people who learned differently. It just means your particular kind of insight came from a harder, slower path. And there's real value in that path. Value that doesn't need to be compared against anyone else's to be worth something. You're not wise because you know everything. You're steady because you've been through enough to stop panicking at the first sign of trouble. And that's genuinely useful, both to you and to people around you. For your calm changes a room, and that's not a threat to anyone. You don't need to be loud to be felt. There's a kind of presence that comes from simply not performing. No forced enthusiasm. No need to fill every silence, just steadiness. And in rooms full of small talk and posturing, that steadiness stands out. That's not because you're trying to unsettle anyone. Authenticity, plainly, just reads differently than performance does. And some people notice the contrast without quite knowing why. You listen more than you speak. You catch the hesitation in someone's voice, the shift in energy when a conversation turns. That's not a supernatural skill, it's attention, sustained over years until it became second nature. You never needed external validation to know what you think. You've got an internal sense of what's true for you. And it doesn't waver just because someone disagrees loudly. That's not stubbornness. It's just having done the work of figuring out your own values instead of borrowing everyone else's. People sometimes wonder how you seem to know things before they're said out loud. It's usually less mysterious than it looks. You pay attention to patterns, to what's consistent and what isn't. And over time, that adds up to something that looks like intuition from the outside. You're not easily swept up in trends, not because you're contrarian, but because you tend to actually think things through instead of reacting immediately. That takes more time, and it's less exciting in the moment, but it holds up better later. You don't need to dominate a room to matter in it. You're not here to be the center of attention. You're here because being honest and present is worth something, even when it's quiet, even when nobody claps for it. Let people wonder about you if they want to. You don't owe anyone a full explanation of how you got here. Keep doing what's worked, staying grounded, staying honest, and letting your calm speak for itself without needing it to convince anyone. 5, you're not behind. You're just on a slower, steadier track. Some people are sprinting for quick wins, loud validation, fast attention. That's a fine way to move through the world if it works for someone. But it was never going to be your rhythm, and that's okay. You move differently. You don't chase every trend, and you don't need to win every argument in the room. You tend to notice a shift before it's obvious to everyone else, not because you're psychic, but because you've trained yourself to pay attention to small signals instead of waiting for the big, obvious ones. There's a reason your words tend to land heavier, even when you say less. Behind a simple sentence is usually a lot of quiet thinking that happened before you said it. You don't speak just to fill space. You speak when it's actually useful, and people can usually tell the difference. You don't panic when plans change, because you've built the habit of preparing instead of reacting. You're not impulsive. You've usually already sensed the shift coming and adjusted before it became a crisis. Here's the thing: anyone could build this habit. It's not a rare gift reserved for a chosen few. It just takes patience and a willingness to sit in uncertainty without rushing to fill it with noise, which most people, understandably, find hard to do. You're not trying to win a race against anyone. You're building something slower, more durable, a way of moving through life that isn't dependent on constant approval to keep going. That's not always the flashiest path, but it tends to hold up over time in a way that quick wins usually don't. Let people move at their pace. You'll keep moving at yours, steady, intentional, not rushing just because everyone else is. 6, being misread for a while doesn't mean you were wrong. Being underestimated for a stretch of time is uncomfortable, but it isn't a verdict on your worth. Sometimes people just aren't paying close enough attention yet, and sometimes it takes a while for steadiness to be recognized as strength instead of being mistaken for passivity. That's frustrating in the moment, but it's worth remembering. The goal was never to be understood by everyone. It was to stay honest with yourself while you figured things out, whether or not anyone was watching closely enough to notice. Eventually, patterns become visible. People notice who stayed consistent and who didn't. That's not revenge, and it doesn't need to be framed as one. It's just what happens over enough time, naturally, without you needing to orchestrate it. You don't need anyone to publicly admit they misjudged you. That's a nice moment if it happens, but it was never the point. The point was staying grounded regardless of whether the room caught on right away. If people copy habits or instincts you built the hard way, that's honestly a compliment, even if it doesn't feel like one. It usually just means what you built was worth noticing. You don't need credit for it to still be yours. Keep building quietly. Recognition, if it comes on its own schedule. And if it doesn't come from everyone, that's fine too. You already know what you built and why it mattered. 7. Distance from people isn't always rejection. Sometimes people drift, and it's easy to read that as a loss or a punishment. But not every distance is a wound. Sometimes it's just two people growing in different directions, and that's a normal human thing, not a conspiracy against you. You don't need to assume the worst about everyone who stepped back. Most people aren't plotting against you. They're just living their own complicated lives, distracted by their own things, sometimes careless without meaning harm. If you felt out of step in certain rooms, it might just mean those particular rooms weren't the right fit for this season of your life. Not that something is wrong with you, and not that everyone in them was against you. It's fine to set boundaries without assuming malice behind every distance. You can protect your peace without needing to believe everyone who's not close to you is secretly an enemy. That's a heavier way to move through the world than it needs to be. Real connection tends to find you when you're not performing for it, when you're just being consistent and honest. That takes patience and sometimes solitude along the way, but the solitude isn't punishment. It's just part of how steady things get built. Keep being who you are without needing everyone around you to fully understand it right away. Some will, some won't yet. Either way, you don't need to carry suspicion toward the ones who haven't caught up. 8. Calm isn't the absence of strength. It's a form of it. Real steadiness doesn't need to announce itself. It just changes the temperature of a room a little, without anyone quite being able to explain why. You don't need to prove your intelligence out loud. It tends to show up in how you handle things, not in how loudly you talk about handling them. That's a quieter kind of confidence, but it's no less real for being quiet. You've learned to tell the difference between actual signal and just noise, between what matters and what's simply loud. That skill took time to build, and it's genuinely useful in relationships, at work, in how you make decisions generally. People don't always say out loud when they respect your steadiness. That's fine. You're not doing this for the acknowledgement. You're doing it because it's a better way to move through hard moments than panicking is. Stay grounded. Let people underestimate the quiet ones if they want to. That's their assumption to carry, not yours to correct. What matters is that you know what you've built, and you keep building it, one steady decision at a time. Closing. So here you are past the doubts, past the rooms that didn't quite fit, past the moments where you wondered if being different was a problem. It usually wasn't. It was just a different pace, a different way of paying attention. This isn't about being better than anyone else. It's about trusting what you've built, patience, discernment, the ability to stay calm when things get loud, and not needing everyone to validate it before you believe it's real. If this resonated, drop a comment and let us know which part hit hardest. Like this video, subscribe if you want more of this, and share it with someone who needs a steadier reminder today. You are never behind. You are just building something that takes longer to show. And that's exactly why it's going to last.